Residence, please.
7560 Shawnee Lane in Westchester, Ohio, 45069.
And Frank, your place of birth, please.
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts.
And the date of this interview is
That's October the 31st, 1960.
that's when you were born, okay? Very good. And your branch of service, please?
I was administrative NCO, and our first sergeant, as it is known.
That was in the Army?
In the Army, yes, in the Maintenance Engineer Company, 968.
Can you recall your service number? It's 31.
3138 4401.
And your highest ranking?
That was administrative NCO or first sergeant.
And Frank, could you tell us something about where you were inducted and how old you were when you were drafted, or did you enlist? How did you end up in
No,
the
I
service?
was drafted. And I was drafted in Providence, Rhode Island. And I think I was 25 years old.
Were there any other members of your family that were in the service?
None, no.
So you were the first.
I'm an only child.
Okay. And you did give us your date of your draft? The date that you were drafted?
I don't think I have it. It was 1943,
You were drafted in 43.
and I think it was in June.
Okay. How did you get to your induction center?
Uh,
By train or automobile or?
I think somebody drove me to it. Yeah. And from there, they put us on a bus and sent us to Camp Evans in Massachusetts. And we were there for about 3 days. And they put us on a train and shipped us all the way down to Breckenridge, Kentucky.
Wow. Okay. Have any recollection of the barracks? What type of barracks were you in? Were they
Well,
the
in
two-story?
in our particular case, it was all one-floor barracks. Then the usual design, and we had in our company area, I think we had 3 barracks buildings as a part of our group.
It's interesting that time of year. How did they heat the barracks? Do you recall?
There was no heat in it at
No
that,
heat.
that time. It was in June.
Oh, excuse me. I was okay. No, that's right. Is this where you received your GI issue then?
Yes. Uh-huh.
This was a 6 weeks basic infantry training.
That's right.
Did anything interesting occur during the training?
The only thing interesting had nothing to do with the Army. It was just that one of our members put a lit cigarette in the staff sergeant's pocket, and that caused a little commotion. I think we had a number of 6x6 that were dug to bury a cigarette butt.
What sort of weapons did you train with? Rifle?
Carbine, and that was as far as our armament was concerned.
Okay.
Everybody was equipped with that.
Were there any fellows in your basic training that you left home with?
No,
So these were all new individuals.
right.
Do
Most of them from the New England area.
you recall any of the models of the automobiles and trucks that were there at the basic training camp?
Well, we had the standard units at that particular part. I guess they must have been GMCs or some other type that were nondescript. They just assigned so many. They had a motor pool for the whole basic area, and everything was drawn from there. And they were standard GI issue, whether they were the 6x6 or the I forget the other one, the smaller one that we drove around. Then for heavy equipment, we had monsters to see. We had in our particular group, we maintained all heavy equipment that was assigned to the engineers. And our particular company was supposed to have been able to take care of a total army. So we were split up in Hawaii. One platoon went in one direction, the other one another direction. And the platoon I was in.
Well, excuse me, though, we're still in basic training. Did you go to any advanced training before
No.
you shipped out? Okay, so you had, what, 6 or 8 weeks of basic training, and
Right.
then you left for the combat area.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's,
And we were usually, well, in the Angar, the first island that we were on, there was no action there, but
Frank, excuse me, before we get there, how were you transported to from basic training to the West Coast? Did you move by
by
train,
train,
or convoy? So it
Yeah.
was, so you moved out as a company with all your equipment and everything on board a train. How long did that take for you to go across the country?
well,
Approximately.
we were, I forget, I don't think we laid over in any place, but I was, back up a little bit, I was in a forward group that was sent to Indio, California by train to prepare the campsite for the balance of the company. And then we went into, well, we had desert training at that particular point. And then we split up, and my platoon went to Yuma, Arizona for more desert training. And some of the others were in one of the mountain camps in California.
Excuse me, how many people would you estimate were in a platoon? It would be about 40, 50
Yeah.
fellows?
Right.
Okay.
I think there was, in the total company, there was 215, 20, something like that. And we had 4 officers, captain and 3 first lieutenants. Excerpts in there. As a funny situation, we had a very democratic type company. There was no great deal of what we call Boy Scout work, like saluting and doing all things like that, where everybody was pretty much on the same plane. In fact, one of our platoon officer went over the hill. And he came back and they made him a captain. So he said, maybe if I go over again, I get another promotion.
This happened here on the mainland before you even got in the combat area?
Yeah,
It was.
it was in Yuma.
Yuma, Arizona. Then when did you, where did you ship from? Was it from San Diego or
No, it was from San Francisco.
San Francisco? Presidio? Presidio?
I don't.
It's a big depot there.
All I can tell you is that one of the gates had a sign above it that through these gates go the world's best soldiers. And they marched our company around it. So,
Come on.
yeah, that's a fact. You had to get a little laugh someplace, you know. But where do we go from here?
So you boarded a ship then?
We boarded a ship. Yes, it was a Liberty ship. I think I can remember the name. Yeah, it was a USS Prince George, and they had different groups in there, and if you wanted to, water was almost non-existent. The scuttlebutts were so hot that you could hardly drink the water, so you'd have to get up in the middle of the night in order to go down to the lower hold and to get water. And because of the heat and all wait a minute, I'm running ahead of myself. We shipped from San Francisco, went to Honolulu, and got into what they call a base yard, which was maintained by the engineers. And from there...
Excuse me, what was Pearl like when you got there? Can you
like a disaster area.
Can you describe some of that? Can you remember any of that?
It was nothing. You weren't allowed to get down in there anyhow. Plus the fact we were stationed in the base yard, I guess, a couple of weeks before they even let us out of the place. Because again, it's part of training. But this was training for the repair of different vehicles as well as equipment. And from there, we were there, I think, about a month. And they broke our company up completely then. One platoon went to Saipan. The other platoon, which I was in, went up to I think it was the Carolinas. But the first stop we had was a little island. It was nothing more than a air base. It was called Angar. And we spent 2 or 3 months there, I believe. Then we were shipped to Leyte. And the same thing existed there. We had probably a couple of months there. And the next move was up to Okinawa. And from Okinawa, we were sent back home. We had all had enough points to be shipped back. There was a rumor that we were going to Korea, but it never happened. And we were in camp at Okinawa for 3 or 4 months, I believe.
Well, back on some of these islands, anything interesting occur with any of the personnel or equipment? Maybe you might describe some of the equipment that you folks worked on and how it was used in the war effort?
Well, the way it was used in the war effort was to feed people. Uh, our our offices on this hangar, the Navy was setting up some refrigeration, and we had never handled refrigeration, but they got us the job. And one of the basic reasons was that that's where all the food was coming into. So as long as we were there, we were eating high on the hog. And it very interesting experience.
Well, what about some of the military equipment that you worked on, some of the big equipment? What type of equipment?
Well, we had different shops, all vehicle mounted. And then the one I was in was in charge of the electrical shop. And we had others for bulldozers and cranes and things of that type. And we even had, one occasion, a broken down dentist chair that must have been there by the Japs, must have put it there because it was that old. And some of these specialty officers, dentists and doctors and things of that sort, they were desperate for anything of that line. But usually the communications was not particularly good because we could, as an example, in my shop, I had, I think, a half a dozen generators, 3 kWs, that needed repair, and we didn't have a single piece of part for it other than cannibalization. But it was pointed out to us where the parts were. They were all on a ship. So by the time we went to another location, we had the parts for that, for the generators, but there was no that type of generator where we were. So first we had the generators broken down, then we had the parts but no generators, and it was typical of the supply section.
What about some combat areas? Were you near any of the front lines at any particular time
Not
on any
that
islands?
close. We had, we weren't that far away either, but on Okinawa we had our company area bombed, and we had some Filipinos in one of our platoons, and a number of them got killed in that. In fact, I was on guard duty that particular night myself, and I could see those bombs coming to me. And the only place I could think of to hide at that time was under the orderly room. Well, it just so happened that the space under the orderly room wasn't wide enough or deep enough for me to get in there. And I often thought, under the stress, had I gotten in there, they'd probably have to lift the building up to get me out. But and in fact, one of the Jap bombers were that close. Well, they were fighters, but they were, machine gunning us and things like that. I actually could see the face of the pilot. And but aside from that, we had no damage. We had a officer who, at the bombing, or when the news came out that we were possibly be bombed, he dove into a foxhole and cut his nose, and he got a Purple Heart for it. So,
Yeah. What about snipers? Did your unit experience any
no,
sniper activity?
no.
What about other war material? You were saying you had problems coordinating materials, did you have any other experiences with shortages or surpluses of something that,
No,
nothing with copper wire or anything like that? Or?
I had, yes, copper wire. Being in the electrical truck, when I was leaving Leyte, for some unknown reason that I never will know, but I took 2 reels of copper wire that used for rewinding motors and things of that sort. And it was like gold when I hit Okinawa. I had the Seabees looking for it, the Marines were looking for it, everybody was looking for copper wire, and I was the only shop that had it.
Well, how much did you have? Did you suppose?
I had 2 reels, I forget what the length of it is, 500 feet or something like that. So I had about 1,000 feet of it.
Did you meet any old school chums or anyone in the service?
When I going from Devons to Breckenridge, we had to go into the chow line and through one of the cars. They had baggage cars that they set up a kitchen for. And when I walked in there, a fellow that I had worked with was there. And then in the same group, different, was another fellow that I had gone to school with, yes. And
Excuse me, would this be elementary school or high school or?
It was an elementary.
Oh, was there?
And in fact, the last time I was in Rhode Island, I visited with him, and I hadn't seen him. In fact, his wife and my wife made a visit to our camp in Breckenridge.
While you were out there in the Pacific, did you see any of these famous generals like MacArthur or anybody frequent your area?
The only thing I know about MacArthur was that anybody who went to his, had to go to his headquarters for any particular purpose. They had issued us those boots that had the rough part of the leather on the outside, and to go in his headquarters, those boots had to be polished.
Whoa.
And which was almost an impossible job because there was no smooth parts to it at all. It was all hairy and stuff like that. You know.
Now this was like a regular work boot, wasn't it? A regular work shoe, just the the leather wasn't dressed down to accept polish. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And were these boots then also the ones that had the double clamps on the top, that just a piece of like 6-inch leather was sewed around the top of the shoe?
Not in these particular. It just, I call them boots because that's about what they were like, but it was nothing more than a high top shoe.
Like a work shoe.
Yeah.
Right. I see. What about frequency of mail and packages from home?
Well, once they got it down, we had a mail call every day, but the letters or whatever may have been a couple of months old by the time you got them.
So there were some Dear Johns coming in way late.
Oh, yeah.
What about U.S. shows? Were you in a position to?
I saw one of them back in California in the camp that we were in. We had a Bob Hope show.
Oh, Bob, did you really?
Yeah.
Great.
And very entertaining.
Remember anybody that was with him?
Yeah, Jerry Colonna for one, and
He was funny.
I forget who the gals were that was with him, but it was usually his regular show. He had put it on, I guess, almost every place. Every once in a while, they'd come through and they would have a different person in there. And, but I, outside of he and Jerry, I didn't pay much attention to any of the others.
What about packages from home? Did you receive any or many? Some fellows never received a package at all.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I did. I think I had one or two packages during the holidays or something of that sort. But that was all.
Do you remember your first holiday in the islands? Which would have been Thanksgiving, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah, we had. We had a new cadre of cooks come in when we were in Yuma, Arizona. These two fellows, they had come up from down on the South Pacific, and they were transferred into our company. And two of them were driven to our camp in Yuma, and they got there about 10 or 10:30 in the morning, and they had the best meal that we had ever had or had up to that time by 12 o'clock.
Is that right?
They had complete turkey dinner and home baked pie and everything else. They worked like beavers. They got it all out.
Okay. What about some religious experiences there? Ministers and priests in the field in the islands. Did any of the priests show up, or?
Oh yeah, yeah. We in our particular platoon, I was usually the one that saw to it that everybody got the mass that was supposed to go, and few of them were rejected by the officers because they only decided to go when it was an opportunity to duck something else. So they wouldn't let them go under those circumstances. But I had no problem with it. Always had a truck available to me. And there was 8 or 10 of us, I think, in the group.
This would be like mass in the field. You'd be going like in the company headquarters or something like that for religious service.
There was some of them like that, but otherwise in some of the camps, and particularly in the States, the camp was big enough so that they had a rec hall and they'd have mass in there.
Was there anything else that went on in the islands while you were out there in the Pacific that sticks with you that you'd like to talk about? Memorable?
Well, there's nothing exceptional by any means, but our group particularly got along with the natives very well. There was no problem there.
Well, tell us about the natives. What sort of natives did you run into?
Polynesian group, similar to the ones you'd see in Hawaii, the natives. I guess they had, well, they were mixed bloods. That's exactly what they were. And you could see some of the Oriental features in them. They were all dark-skinned, very fun-loving people. And about the only activities they got involved in was fishing. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was a requirement to live. So, but there was nothing to keep them busy.
Now, Frank, on what islands did you run into these people? On Leyte or
On
the Philippines? Or
yeah, Leyte, and we have a few on Angkor, not too many.
now, were some of these people possibly had been prisoners of the Japanese?
No,
They had not been. So
not any that I ran into
that
at
you
least.
knew of. In light of that, then, do you remember where you were on May 7th in 45 when the war ended in Europe?
Uh,
Did that news take a while to get to the Pacific, or were you
I-
abreast of it?
I was in Okinawa at the time, and we had some of the people were being shipped from Europe to our area. I can remember where one of the fellows that was shipped over wanted to know where the Hamburg stands were. So it was different theater, but
Then in September 2nd of 45, when the A-bomb was dropped in Japan, or the surrender of Japan was dropped before that,
yeah,
but
I
dropped in August.
don't recall exactly what we did at that particular time, but
Excuse me, were you still out there in the Pacific then?
oh yeah, yeah, we were there until MacArthur signed the
That'd be September
treaty
2nd.
or whatever it was.
What about the little sign Kilroy was here? Did you ever bump into any of those out in the Pacific?
Oh, they were every place, particularly in the Johns and the shower stalls and things like that. I had one scary thing happen to me, not scary for my part, but for my wife's part. We were in the desert training in the States, and I went into the shower room, took my dog tags off, hung them up, went out of there without them, and they sent my wife back my dog tags.
Oh, gee.
So she thought I had gone. But I guess some message followed up rather closely, so it didn't get too much of a deal. But that, for her part, it was a scary deal.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
Good gracious. So when you finished up in Okinawa and came on back to the mainland, huh? As a company, and brought all your heavy equipment back with you, or
No,
just left it there?
all of our equipment, as I said, was all mobile on trucks. No, and it was beautiful equipment, but it was all left right there in Okinawa. I don't know what they did with it, but I suppose the local people in Okinawa, of course, was turned back to the Japanese. So all of that was left for them, or whoever was taking over.
Whoever got the keys, huh?
Yeah, right.
What was that like when you left? You got the orders to leave the island? Just everybody got up and picked up their effects and...
No, it wasn't. It was kind of piecemeal for our particular group because we had been infiltrated with replacements all along the line, and their count, point count, was different and lower than ours. So it was our platoon, what was left of it. We all went back at one time, but the company was still there. They maintained it for I don't know how long after that, but they did. And at that point in time, I was the first sergeant of that group. And I figured that I was going to have a restful trip back on a Liberty ship. It wasn't a Liberty ship either. It was the next one up, but had more accommodating areas than the first one we were on. And it just so happened that alphabetically, I was the highest ranking sergeant on the ship. So I was hauled up to the deck and told, get this ship loaded. And I'll never forget on one occasion when we were trying to place people in different areas, and at that particular time, the blacks weren't welcome too much. And I was down in the mess hall, and this sergeant came up to me. He says, "Sergeant, I think maybe you need some help." This fella stood about 6'5", 300 pounds, former New York State Police, and he just stood right there with me. And I had only one of the other sergeants challenge me on a thing, and he was right by my side at that time. And I just pawned it off as being a misunderstood name. But that otherwise, we just put them in as they came down. In fact, there was a ensign doing the job, and things were moving so slowly that I forget, one of the ship's captains said, "Get that damn people on this boat." So I went down there and I got the ensign. He said, "Get the hell out of here, you're just holding them back," you know. And so then we really start pushing them through. Then the first night out, I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened by some of the cooking staff. They wanted to know where our KPs were. Well, nobody told me I had to select KPs. So that day, I guess I spent the day making breakout crews and KPs and all the other assignments. But no one was kind enough to tell me that all of this had to be.
Frank, if we could back up just a bit, you were talking about points before. Could you explain how points were accrued and how many points were needed? Do you recall?
I don't really recall. I know that it was based on the number of months you were there for primarily. That was what did it. And
how many points would you need to rotate out of the theater?
I really can't even answer that because we never paid attention to it. And when it came up for separation, it was all on our records.
Okay.
So it became somewhat automatic.
You trusted somebody else.
Yeah.
They were counting right.
Yeah, right.
That's unusual. And you also mentioned boarding the ship. There was possibly something to do with integration and segregation with the different races.
Actually, that was isolated to one part. The ship was pretty well crowded, and they had one section on one of the first deck. I guess there were 2 or 3 above, but there was usually used for officers, and that was the only available space we had to reduce the crowded area down below. So it was decided by the ship's company or whoever that we put all non-coms in there, but they had to be white. So.
Is that right? They would break them out like that. They had to be white.
Well, actually, they made up a list.
Right, and they just so happen.
Yeah.
Happens, yeah.
Yeah.
What about this New York State policeman, ex-policeman who was staying alongside you? What ethnic background was he?
He was a white fellow.
He was a white fellow.
Yeah.
'Cause I think that's something we lose sight of now with the segregation, that how prevalent it was back then.
Yeah.
And, you know, here in the year 2000, it's more integrated than,
Oh, sure.
it's hard to believe that you know,
Yeah.
there was that much segregation.
That's right. In fact, we on our way back from where did we land? Uh,
Here in Long Beach?
yeah, Long Beach. That's right. I think we got there about 2 o'clock in the morning and had a steak dinner, and they had us up, I think, at 5 to get on a train. No, get on a plane. We flew from there to Camp Dix, I guess it was. And along the way, we stopped. I guess they had a
Camp
refuel.
Devens? Camp Devens?
Right, that would be the terminal.
Okay.
On the way, they apparently had to refuel, so they sent us down. They sat down at this airport, and the fellows went into the restaurant, and amongst us was one black fellow, and they wouldn't serve him. So the rest of them all got up and walked out.
Good for them.
Yeah,
Where was that? Do you recall?
someplace in Texas. I don't know whether it's Dallas or Fort Worth or someplace. But that was what happened there.
That's memorable. That's pretty neat. So you were on your way home.
Right.
You got up to Fort Dix and
Or whatever I I remember the pilot flew us around the Statue of Liberty, and he was banked like that, and there was one fellow that had been holding on to it all across the country, and boy, when that plane tipped, he just took all his cookies.
he'll never forget that. Well,
No, he never will.
very good. Then you sat down. What type of aircraft were you on? Do you recall? Just military transport. Matt's.
No, it was a regular transport plane.
Those military aircraft.
I don't
Or was it
think,
commercial?
I think it was, it might have been chartered commercial.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Okay, what about your reception at home? How long, well, before we did that, how long did it take you to get out of your, post up there?
Actually, it didn't take, there was 2 groups of us. One group got there, I think they got there before us. And we got out of there before they did.
Was that right?
What happened is they were, at the time they got there, and I don't know how they got there before we did, but anyhow, they were so crowded they sent them all home. And when we were being released totally, these people were coming back so they could get released. So we didn't have to go through that at all, but they did, you know.
So from there you headed on home, huh?
Mm-hmm.
How did you train, or somebody come down and pick you up? Or?
Somebody was up there to meet us and drove us home.
Great. Great. Well, you had any contacts with, well, you mentioned your contact with one fellow.
Well, actually, I have one that's still alive. There was another one I had, used to visit in Florida. He passed away here about a year or so ago. The one up in Rhode Island, who happens to be my daughter's godfather, He's still hanging in there. All the rest, a lot of them passed away, and others, I don't know whether they're alive or not.
Frank, something I just happened to remember. We never did this, describe the army that you were attached to. What army were you attached to there in the Pacific? Do you recall?
I don't recall, really. Actually, we were under the Island Command when we were aboard, on the island
On the
itself.
islands, right.
I know the 7th Division was there. In fact, our camp was just across the road from the 7th Division cemetery. But all I could say is we were attached to the Island Command.
Very good. What about some post-war organizations? You belong to VFW, American Legion, or?
I've been a life member of American Legion. I forget how many years I've been there. It's pretty close to 50, I think.
Yeah, it would be.
"48 years.
Wow,
No, 46 years.
that's great.
And the VFW keeps sending me things,
Just
want me
sign
to send them money.
it. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, is there anything else you'd like to add to the tape? Comments you'd like to make about your experiences in
No, it was a good experience, I thought, in my particular case. Simply because I didn't fight it. A lot of the people just made it so miserable for themselves because they were fighting it all the time.
I mean, fighting the organization,
Yeah,
the
Yeah.
structure.
right. And of course, being drafted, they were saying they didn't belong there. They weren't particularly happy with the draft. But again, as I said, you accept your situation and go along with it, and it's not that bad. Under the circumstances, at least.
Anything else?
That's about it.
Very good. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.